Nama Om Vishnuvadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamin iti namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatharine Mancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Thank you all for coming. I know there are a lot of different things going on here in Mayapur today, so those of you who are determined to come and hear about animals and Shastra, you are a very special group. Who was here 3 days ago when we started this discussion? Okay, many of you. For those of you who were not here, we will not repeat what we spoke on the first day, except to say, very generally, we all experience today, in this age, a kind of disconnect, a sense of disconnect. We might call it V-yoga. Yoga means to connect. V-yoga means disconnect. So we are all, to a large degree, disconnected. Of course, we're disconnected from the Lord, and we're also disconnected from the Lord's nature. We are simultaneously very absorbed in material nature, prakriti, and yet we feel also alienated from nature, from the Lord's creation. And this means we are also alienated from all the different animals, the animal species. We are told there are 8,400,000 species of life, according to Puranas. 8,400,000 varieties of ways of experiencing material nature. 8,400,000 ways the Lord provides facility for conditioned souls to enjoy in this world. We are told that all of us have been through so many different species of life. Imagine, sometimes we hear in the evening time, usually around 5, 6 in the evening, and also later depending where you are here in Mayapur, you may hear the jackals howling. Have you heard the jackals howling? The spooky sound of the jackals. Yeah? It's quite an experience, a kind of spine-chilling experience. Could it be that we were once jackals? Or, you name it, any of the other species of life? We may find it hard to imagine, and yet if you think about it, if the soul is eternal, that's a big word, and that's a long time. Time without beginning, time without end, that's a long time. So seen from that perspective, it's really very possible. In fact, it's very probable that we have gone through so many different species of life. So this is very wonderful. And what's also wonderful is that the Lord Himself appears. First of all, it's wonderful that He appears in this world. He wouldn't have to, but He does. As we know, Krishna explains in the Gita. This is His, we might say it's the Lord's sadhana. The Lord doesn't need to practice sadhana. We have to practice sadhana, but the Lord gives example. Not exactly example with regard to appearing in the world, but the Lord appears in this world. From time to time, He says. He appears different times. But also He appears in different forms. And we are told that in fact He appears in every single one of the 8,400,000 species of life. Imagine that. The Supreme Person descending and condescending, accepting the lowest forms of life. For what purpose? In order to liberate those forms of life, to give all the different living beings opportunity to return to Him. So one thing we discussed on the first day was how different species of life provide lessons for us. As we progress on the path of spiritual progress, we look around us, we see any number of species of life, we see their behavior, and from their behavior we can learn so much. One lesson we can learn from all species of life, including human species, is that our life in this world is temporary. As we look around, we see insects, we see birds, we see four-legged animals that are living, and then we see those that are dying. Some insects don't live more than a day. Elephants, they may live, how long do elephants live? Very long. And there are some forms of plant, of lichen. These are what you see, green moss growing on trees. that can live for hundreds of years, even thousands of years. There are plants in the sea also that can live thousands of years, but then they die. Everything is temporary. So that we can learn. Yes, we went through the 20, not all, but some of the 24 gurus of the Avanti Brahmana in the 11th canto. We also discussed some topics involving animals in the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, and I wanted to move on from the Bhagavatam to Chaitanya Charitamrita. Srila Prabhupada once said, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appeared in contrast to Lord Krishna, who appeared thousands of years ago. He said, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appeared within the memory of us all. Meaning, within the collective memory. We have a cultural memory, which you can say easily goes back 500 and more years, whereas we don't have so much of a cultural memory going back 5,000 years. So we come to Chaitanya Charitamrita, we have the wonderful pastimes of the Lord appearing as Bhakta. And of course, he doesn't appear alone. Panchatattvatmakam Krishnam, Bhaktarupa Swarupakam, Bhaktavataram Bhaktakyam Namami, Bhakta Shaktikam. And Sri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Sri Advaita, Gadadhar, Shivas Adi, Gaura Bhaktavinda. The Shivas Adi, Gaura Bhaktavinda. What is that Adi? Adi means beginning with. Beginning with Srivas, Gaura Bhaktavrinda, the whole assembly of Gaura Bhaktas, devotees of Gaura. And the assembly of Bhaktas, Gaura Bhaktas, includes some animals, as is described by Krishnadas Kaviraj. So we want to reflect on some of these pastimes. But before I do this, I want to try to explain something I came to appreciate about the Chaitanya Charitamrita as a whole. And this is best illustrated with a kind of mandala. So I have to ask you to try to imagine a mandala. Mandala simply means circle, but this is a mandala of multiple circles, which are one smaller, one larger, one larger. So they're consecutive circles. One circle enclosing another, enclosing another. Okay? You may say it's like a target, you know? So imagine this target with these consecutive circles. And in the center of the circle we have Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and the Panchatattva and the very close associates of Lord Chaitanya. And I could elaborate on each one of these circles, but I'm going to do this very quickly. The next circle coming away from the center, if you like, consists of Vaishnavas who are not followers of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, which means to say they are followers of different Vaishnava sampradayas. And what we find in Chaitanya Charitamrita, we find descriptions of Lord Chaitanya meeting with some followers of these Vaishnava sampradayas and having different kinds of exchanges with each one. So, for example, when Lord Chaitanya travels south, he meets with the Sri Vaishnava Sampradaya, and he stays with Venkatabhatta, one of the senior, or the senior priest of the Srirangam temple. He stays with him during the 4 months of the rainy season. He is the guest of Venkatabhatta. And we read from Krishnadas Kaviraj the sweet exchanges that they had, a kind of joking kind of relationship they had, in which Lord Chaitanya is sometimes a little bit poking fun at Venkatabhatta and challenging him in a friendly way. Your Lakshmi Devi, why is it, how is it that while she is the goddess of fortune, the eternal associate of Lord Narayana, why is it that she wants to leave Lord Narayana's company in order to have the company of Krishna in the rasa dance? Why is that? Huh? And so like this, they have some humorous exchange, which is also instructive. All right, this is a kind of circle. If we go to the next circle, we're moving further away, so to say, from the center of Lord Chaitanya and his associates. And by the way, in Chaitanya Charitamrita, approximately 300 associates of Lord Chaitanya are mentioned. Some, of course, are elaborated much more. Some, we only hear the names. But 300, and someone counted exact number, I don't remember. Something over 300 are mentioned. We go to the next ring, and we have a different category. This is the category of Brahmins, people who follow Brahminical culture, what we call Brahminical culture, or perhaps Vedic culture. And Lord Chaitanya is meeting with certain representatives of them. In particular, he meets with Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. He meets with Prakashananda Saraswati. And of course, there's another common category to the two of them. They're identified by Krishnadas Kaviraj as philosophically following the Mayavada, until they meet Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and understand a higher vision of what is Krishna Bhakti. Then there's another category, another circle of the target of the mandala, which is further away. And this consists of Shaktas, Tantrikas, Buddhists, and tribals. I've put them all into one category, although they're very different in so many ways. There can be Brahminical Tantrikas, and I've put them all in one category. Why? Because Krishnadas Kaviraj refers to all of them as Pashandi or Pakhandi, which can mean something like heretic. Sometimes Prabhupada would translate atheist. It's a quite strong negative term. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu meets with representatives of each of these groups and has different kinds of exchange with them, wonderful exchanges. There's another category that's further out from the center circle, so to speak. When I say closer and further, I mean in terms of culture or in terms of philosophy or theology. And so there's another category which is further out, and that further out category consists of followers of Islam, what are called Muslim or Mohammedan. And as we know, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has exchanges with some of these. The one which we celebrate, you could say the most, is his interaction with his very dear devotee, Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur, who is said to have come from a Muslim background, a Muslim family. And of course, the exchange with the Qazi, and others. There are other exchanges. In all of these exchanges, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is extending himself out. He is reaching out, and he is bringing them in, or in some cases, he's letting them be. He's respecting them and letting them be. There's one more outermost ring to this mandala. And this ring consists of plants, animals, rocks, hills, what we might call the natural environment. And here's what's interesting about this category, is that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu exhibits sometimes his most intense emotions in relation to these objects or these animals and so on. Especially when he goes to Vrindavan, or when he is internally in Vrindavan, but he is in Puri, for example. So there's a kind of irony here. We have this mandala of different kinds of relationships, closer, you can say further away, and we come then to nature, the different objects, the animals of nature, in some sense the farthest, the most distant from Lord Chaitanya, but then they become the closest to Lord Chaitanya. Sometimes animals in Chaitanya Charitamrita are mentioned simply for purposes of illustration in a kind of symbolic way. Krishnadas Kaviraj, who is writing the Chaitanya Charitamrita and who is speaking about himself, sometimes he is being autobiographical. He's telling how it is that he came to Vrindavan. He had darshan, direct darshan of Lord Balaram, who instructed him, go to Vrindavan. And so he spent most of his life, he was quite young when he went to Vrindavan. And now when he is writing Chaitanya Charitamrita, he is very elderly. So elderly, he says, my hands are shaking. My eyes are not clear. I do not know how long I have to live. But he says something else about himself, which is a bit shocking. He says, I am lower than a worm in stool. If we think about different living beings in terms of elevation of consciousness, there's hardly a living being one would think of that is lower than this. And Krishnadas Kaviraj is describing himself in that way. So where does that put us? This exalted, so exalted Vaishnava that he was selected by the Vaishnavas in Vrindavan to write Chaitanya Charitamrita. They begged him, please tell the later pastimes of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He is thinking of himself as, we say lower than the straw in the street, but okay, lower than the straw in the street, lower than the grass, trinadapi, sunichena, yeah, that's really low. But to think of yourself as lower than a worm in stool, it's very graphic, isn't it? But Krishnadas Kaviraj also compares himself to a dog. What sort of dog? A dancing dog. Dancing dog? Sometimes someone may train a dog to jump, to dance, to entertain people. People give donations. So that position, a dancing dog, this is, dogs are considered lowly. A dancing dog means someone who is simply serving the master for no good purpose for its own. So look, Krishnadas Kaviraj refers to himself that way. He also compares himself to a parrot. And here, of course, the comparison is to highlight the idea of repeating what he has heard. One can use that example in a negative sense. We say, you're just parroting, which means, you know, if we teach a parrot to chant Hare Krishna, and the parrot goes, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, we don't have the sense that that is Shuddha Nam, right? It's just, yeah, it's what parrots do. But again, Krishnadas Kaviraj here is using it in a positive sense, that I am simply repeating what I have heard from my acharyas. I mentioned that the Lord appears in all the different species of life. That is wonderful. It becomes all the more wonderful when that Lord is Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. As Chaitanya Mahaprabhu being in the bhava of a devotee, and we know in particular in the bhava, the feelings he has, especially of separation, of viraha, from Krishna. The irony is that he is Krishna and he is feeling himself separate from Krishna. And in particular, this occurs in one of the dramatic high moments of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Lila chapter 13. What happens in this chapter? This is the description of Ratha Yatra, Jagannath Ratha Yatra. It's described in some detail with all the kirtan parties, Lord Chaitanya expanding himself into how many forms? 7 forms. Only certain people can see that Lord Chaitanya has expanded himself in this way. The kirtaniyas are chanting, singing thunderously. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is dancing. He's seeing Lord Jagannath. Sometimes he is falling on the ground. Sometimes he is spinning around like a firebrand. And sometimes his limbs shrink into his body like kurma. Kurma tortoise has this special ability, special qualification. It's also, incidentally, the qualification of the devotee who is practiced in withdrawing the senses from the sense objects, right? This is mentioned in, Krishna mentions this in Bhagavad Gita. Sometimes Lord Chaitanya's arms extend, his limbs would extend out longer than usual, but sometimes they would shrink in. And sometimes Lord Jagannath, the form of Lord Jagannath, have you ever wondered why is it that Lord Jagannath has these stumpy hands or arms? It's because he is in the kurma bhava, in his ecstasy, hearing about his own pastimes. Lord Jagannath is exhibiting this activity of shrinking the limbs into his body. This is not something we can imitate, I believe. If we think further about Kurma, we know Kurma avatar in Srimad Bhagavatam is that form of the Lord who takes this lowly position underneath the mountain, Mandara, is it Mandara mountain? Which is being used as a pivot for what purpose? In order to churn, because why? Because the Devas and the Asuras are determined to get Amrita. All right, here's how you do it. The Lord facilitates. And why is he doing all of this? In the Bhagavatam is a verse almost at the very end of Canto 12 that Kurma Avatar arranged this entire pastime. Why? Because he was feeling some itching sensation on the back. So in order to get this scratched, and the verse is a prayer that we may be blessed by the wind that comes from the churning of Mandara, as Kurma is having his back scratched. So the Lord is appearing in different animal forms. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur had a very interesting, what we might call, interpretation of the Lord's avatars as a progression of evolution. The idea of evolution is very dominant in modern culture, modern society. Western thought all of the biological sciences, they are dominated entirely, you can say, by evolutionary theory, as it's called, where there's the idea of a progression from simpler to more complex species. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur was hearing about these ideas in the 19th century, and he thought, yes, evolution, why not? But, he said, what is the actual evolution? The evolution is, the word evolve means to unfold. So it's an unfolding of the pastimes of the Lord. And the Lord demonstrates that directly in his appearing as a fish, as a tortoise, as Varahadev. Varaha, the boar incarnation. I find in this particular pastime one example of so many examples of the Lord's humor. When the Lord appears, he's appearing for very important work to be done, but he's also appearing to have a good time, as he does when he appears as Varaha. And when he first appears as Varaha, from where does he appear? Everyone's pointing to the nose. Yes. He appears from the nose of Lord Brahma. I sometimes wonder which nose. If he had four, since he had four heads. So he must have appeared from one of those. And from which nostril of which nose? That's the kind of question someone will ask in a Bhagavatam. Maharaj, can you please tell which nostril did the Lord appear from? Hare Krishna. Now, I find this very humorous because what is it that usually comes out of our nostrils? Nothing very nice. But when the Lord wants to appear, who is to stop him from appearing from the nostril of Lord Brahma? Initially very small and then immediately expanding himself to such a vast size that all the devas throw themselves before him, offering their prayers, recognizing him to be nothing less than the very embodiment of sacrifice, which is what the devas are very concerned with, sacrifice. They want to receive the offerings of sacrifice. Well, here's the embodiment of sacrifice. And what does the embodiment of sacrifice look like? A pig. The divine pig. What a strange and wonderful religion. We worship God as a pig. Not any pig, but a wild pig. But he's no ordinary pig. He is the primordial pig. And pigs are usually thought of as very lowly, but from this pastime we understand pigs are very special. Actually, pigs are very intelligent, it turns out. Some people have pet pigs. Did you know that? Yeah. But then, even more wonderful is when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appears. When Chaitanya Mahaprabhu assumes the bhava of Varaha, he goes with Murari Gupta to Murari Gupta's home, where Murari Gupta has a temple, and in the temple, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu suddenly, we say in English, out of the blue, just who can understand? He sees a jug, a pot of water, and this, again, it's an object, and this object suddenly, it becomes an object of uddipana. It becomes, it inspires him. And he takes on this mood. And Murari Gupta is wondering what is going on. And there's different versions of this. Vrindavandas Thakur has one explanation. Krishnadas Kaviraj just refers to it very briefly. I believe it's Krishnadas who says he climbs on the shoulders of Murari Gupta. He's holding this jug. Why? The jug is the earth, so he's like lifting up the earth. And he tells Murari Gupta, offer me prayers. This is not for imitation, right? Offer prayers. And Murari Gupta is offering him prayers. So it's the Lord in the mood of a devotee who's suddenly in the mood of the Lord, and he's overwhelmed with a feeling which is inspiring his devotee to serve him in that form. In a similar way, Lord Chaitanya suddenly, as he's reciting or hearing the Vishnu Sahasranam Stotra, the name of Nrsimha comes again as an uddipana, and suddenly he is not the peaceful Brahmin, he is the wild lion. And as he goes charging down the village road, everyone is terrified as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is in this mood of Nrsimhadev, looking for the demons. So the Lord appears as animal, but we understand the Lord is the original, the primordial form of all the different species of life. Well, the two pastimes that I wanted to look at, and we can read some, are Lord Chaitanya's traveling through Jharikanda. One moment. And I think time will allow. There's, of course, the wonderful pastime of Lord Chaitanya liberating Shivananda Sena's dog. Lord Chaitanya had this desire to go to Vrindavan. It was frustrated more than once by various circumstances. His initial idea was, take sannyas, go to Vrindavan, Hare Krishna. Fortunately, for all of us, that didn't happen. He was traveling and preaching, and so many pastimes took place. But finally the opportunity came to go to Vrindavan, but he would go by a secret way. And the secret way would be through the Jharikand forest. Sometime in recent years, Jharkhand has become a separate state of India. I don't know if there's any forest left there, but In Lord Chaitanya's time, we can imagine it was very rich forest full of so many different kinds of animals. And we know this story, but let's review. Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Beta Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Beta Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Beta Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. In Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya Lila, chapter 17, starting with verse 25. Nirjana Vanne Chole Prabhu Krishna Namalaya Hasti Bagra Pattachade Prabhu Redakya. When the Lord passed through the solitary forest, chanting the holy name of Krishna, the tigers and elephants, seeing him, gave way. They made space for him. Pale pale vyagra hasti gandhara sukaragana. Tara madhye aveshe prabhu korila gamana. When the Lord passed through the jungle in great ecstasy, packs of tigers, elephants, rhinoceros, and boars came, and the Lord passed right through them. Usually boars will hide themselves in the daytime, and I don't know, elephants I think are not usually coming out either. Dekki bata charger mane hoy mahabhoy prabhur pratape tara ekkapashoy. Balabhadra Bhattacharya was very much afraid to see them. But by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's influence, all the animals stood to one side. Balabhadra Bhattacharya was, of course, the assistant, the traveling companion of Lord Chaitanya. And he plays interesting roles in Lord Chaitanya's pastimes, especially in Vrindavan. But on the way to Vrindavan, we hear how Balabhadra Bhattacharya became frightened seeing all these animals. So we have this contrast. There's Lord Chaitanya, who is happily marching along through the forest. And on the other, in contrast, we have Balabhadra Bhattacharya, who is shaking, we say shaking in his boots, except he probably wasn't wearing boots. But he sees all the animals are making way for the Lord. Ekkadina patte bagra korirache shayan abeshe targaye prabhu lagiya charan. One day a tiger was lying on the path, and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, walking along the path in ecstatic love, touched the tiger with his feet. The word aveshe in this verse is interesting. Avesha, it comes several times in Chaitanya Charitamrita. It means absorption. It comes from vish, which means to enter. And from this we have Vishnu, the Lord, who enters into this world. But avesha means absorption, or it can also mean possession. Possession in the sense of like when a ghost enters into a person and takes over that person's personality. That's also avesha. So, but in the case of Lord Chaitanya, it's prema avesha. He is possessed with prema. But here it just mentions avesha, aveshe, in a state of possession, you can say. Taragaye, Prabhu Lagila Charana. He touches him with his lotus feet. So what a blessing for a tiger to be touched by Lord Chaitanya's feet. Now Lord Chaitanya is going to speak. Prabhu kohe, kaha Krishna vyagra utila, Krishna Krishna kahi vyagra nachite lagila. The Lord said, chant the holy name of Krishna. The tiger immediately got up and began to dance and to chant, Krishna, Krishna. I suspect that if a tiger walked in right now, we would all kind of very quickly stand up and move to the other side. But Lord Chaitanya was just walking up to this, initially apparently just sleeping tiger, just kind of, like you see the dogs out here, they'll just lie in the middle of the street all day. So a tiger would just flopped over like that, and Lord Chaitanya comes, hey, get up, chant Hare Krishna. Oh, okay. And tiger jumps up and chants Hare Krishna. Don't you wish someone would have been there with a video camera? Aradine Mahaprabhu kore nadisnan matta hasti jukta aila korite jalapan. Another day, while Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was bathing in a river, a herd of maddened elephants came there to drink water. Matta hasti jukta. So these are not just elephants, but they are matta. They're elephants apparently in rut. Elephants in rut can be very dangerous. But they've come to drink water. Lord Chaitanya is bathing, and what happens? Prabhu jala kritya kare age hasti aila, Krishna kaha boli Prabhu jala peli marila. While the Lord was bathing and murmuring Gayatri mantra, the elephants came before him. The Lord immediately splashed some water on the elephants and asked them to chant the name of Krishna. So picture this scene. Here's Lord Chaitanya out in the middle of nowhere, and he's having his daily bath, and he's chanting Gayatri, and these elephants come up, and we might say they're checking him out. But of course, he's the all-attractive Lord, and so naturally they will come. They want to have his darshan. So they're having his darshan, and how does Lord Chaitanya respond? Splashes them. Chant Hare Krishna. Prabhupada gives a long purport to this verse. She jal bindu khana lage jaragai, she Krishna Krishna kahe preme nache gai. The elephants whose bodies were touched by the water, splashed by the Lord, began to chant Krishna Krishna and dance and sing in ecstasy. Now, at this point, we might be skeptical. We might say, wait a minute. Elephants don't have the capacity to chant Krishna Krishna. Have you ever heard an elephant chant Krishna Krishna? Have you ever heard an elephant, have you ever seen an elephant dance? Actually, elephants can dance. Yeah? Have you heard elephants sing? Actually, they can make quite loud singing, huh? So, put all this together, combine with the fact that Lord Chaitanya is there, combine this with the fact that the Lord is Satya Sankalpa, he whose desire is automatically realized. So the Lord wants the elephants to chant Hare Krishna. Are they going to chant Hare Krishna? Why not? Some of the elephants fell to the ground. Some screamed in ecstasy. Seeing this, Balabhadra Bhattacharya was completely astonished. I think I would have been more than completely astonished. Sometimes Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu chanted very loudly while passing through the jungle. Hearing his sweet voice, all the does came near him. Doe is a female deer. So this is going to be further description. First it was the tiger, then the elephants, then the deer. And then the Lord is going to chant a verse, which is quoted from Srimad Bhagavatam. There's a fancy word for this in literary scholarship. It's called intertextuality. When you have one text, one book, referring to another book, sometimes explicitly, sometimes implicitly. Here it's quite explicit. And this is a very nice verse. Do you want to hear it? No? Yeah, why not? Danyasma, let's see, how does this? Danyasma mudamatayo piharinya eta ya nanda nandanamupata vichitra vesham akarnya venuranitam saha Krishna sara pujam dadur virachitam pranayavalokai. Blessed are all these foolish deer, because they have approached Maharaj Nanda's son, who is gorgeously dressed and is playing on his flute. Indeed, both the does and the bucks, the female and the male deers, worship the Lord with looks of love and affection. This is nature in the spiritual world, in Vrindavan, in Jharkhand, as the Lord is passing through Jharkhand. He transforms what is an ordinary jungle into the spiritual world. And then later in the description, all the different animals are chanting and dancing together. And Prabhupada says this is not something we can imitate to get the animals dancing like this. Okay, I want to proceed briefly to the pastime of Shivananda Sena and his dog. If I can find it, I have to think. One moment. 1993. I should have noted. Yes, here we are. As we all know, the followers of Lord Chaitanya used to travel from Navadvip and from other parts of Bengal all the way to Puri every year to meet Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and to stay in Puri for some time. And the person who managed their travel was Shivananda Sena. And Shivananda Sena had a very important service, and although he had this important service and with many responsibilities, he also felt some responsibility for a certain dog. Ekka kukkur chale Shivananda sane, Bhakshadiya laya chale Korea palane. While going to Jagannath Puri, Shivananda Sen allowed a dog to go with him. He supplied it food to eat and maintained it. Ekka dina ekka stane nadi para hoite, Uriya navika kukurna chadai naukate. One day, when they needed to cross a river, an Odishan boatman would not allow the dog to get in the boat. Now, in the West, people would wonder, why wouldn't someone let a dog get in the boat? Because dogs are, there's a different cultural attitude to dogs in the West than there is in India. But here in India, dogs, they're considered muchi, considered untouchable. You have to take a bath after. Kukur rahila Shivananda dukki hoila, Dashapana karidiya kukure para koila. Shivananda Sen, unhappy that the dog had to stay behind, paid the boatman 10 pana of conch shells to take the dog across the river. What that would be comparable to today in today's money, I have no idea. But it seems to have been enough to convince the boatman, okay, you can take the dog. And so he does. Ekkadina Shivanande gatti ale rakila kukurake battadite sheva pasharila. One day, while Shivananda was detained by a tollman, his servant forgot to give the dog its cooked rice. Now that's interesting. He was feeding the dog cooked rice. In the West, people feed their dogs so-called dog food, which they buy in the supermarket, and which is predominantly made of meat, because dogs are generally carnivores. But here, Shivananda is serving rice, cooked rice. Ratreyasi Shivananda bojaner kale kukur payache bata shevake puchile. At night, when Shivananda Sen returned and was taking his meal, he inquired from the servant whether the dog had gotten its meals. Kukur nahi pai bhatta shuni dukhi hoila, kukur chahite dosh manusya patayila. When he learned that the dog had not been supplied food in his absence, he was very unhappy. He then immediately sent 10 men to find the dog. 10 men he sent to find the dog. That suggests that Shivananda Sen considered this dog no ordinary dog. So he's already in that position. Chahiya napaila kukuloka shaba aila dukki hayya Shivananda upavasa koila. When the men returned without success, Shivananda Sen became very unhappy and fasted for the night. So Shivananda had a relationship with this dog. It reminds me of King Yudhishthir. At the end of Mahabharata, King Yudhishthir is progressing up the Himalaya to end his life with the Pandavas. They're on the, what is it called? The Mahaprasthan. And a dog is following him. And Yudhishthir is taking care of this dog. And finally he comes to a place where the Lord, where Lord Indra appears to him and invites him to now enter into Svarga. he invites Yudhishthira to enter into Svarga. And Yudhishthira, he says basically, yes, I'm happy to come. This dog is my friend. He's coming with me. Indra says, no, he's not. No place for dogs in Svarga. Sorry. And Yudhishthira says, well, if he can't come, then I'm not going. Because he has taken shelter of me. And therefore I have responsibility for him. And so he insisted. And Indra said, I'm sorry, you can't, no dogs. There's a sign on the front door of Svarga that says no dogs allowed. We have to follow the rules. Okay, you can keep your rules, I'll stay out then. So then, of course, the dog appears, or the dog's actual form appears. He is Dharma personified. This was a test. And he demonstrates Yudhishthira, is actually following Dharma. What is that Dharma? He is acting as a proper king, sheltering not just human beings, but all praja, as Srila Prabhupada would say, all the citizens. So Shivananda Sen is feeling very bad that the dog has disappeared, so much so that he's fasting. And he said, then it says, in the morning they looked for the dog, could not be found anywhere. All the Vaishnavas were astonished. Chamatkar hoila, astonished. And there's a long purport to that verse. Thus, in great anxiety, they all walked to Jagannath Puri, where Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu met them as usual. Shabalaya Kaila Jagannatha Darashan, Shabalaya Mahaprabhu Korina Bhojan. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu went with them to see the Lord in the temple, and on that day he also took lunch in the company of all the devotees. As previously, the Lord provided them all with residential quarters, and the next morning all the devotees came to see the Lord. Asya dakila shabe sheta kukure Prabhu pashe basiache kichu opadure. When all the devotees came to the place of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, they saw the same dog sitting a little apart from the Lord. Prasad narikela sasod dena pelaya Rama Krishna Hari Kaha Bolena Hasya. Furthermore, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was throwing remnants of green coconut pulp to the dog. Smiling in his own way, he was saying to the dog, chant the holy names, Rama, Krishna, and Hari. Shasa Kai Kukur Krishna kahe bara bara dakiya loker mone hoila chamotkara. Seeing the dog eating the green coconut pulp and chanting Krishna, Krishna again and again, all the devotees present were very surprised. Again, we may wonder, how does a dog chant Krishna, Krishna? Maybe it's more like Krishna, Krishna. But in any case, if Lord Chaitanya wants, he is what? What is the qualification of Lord Chaitanya? He is, starts with an S. Satya Sankalpa, Satya Sankalpa. When he saw the dog sitting in that way and chanting the name of Krishna, Shivananda, because of his natural humility, immediately offered his obeisance to the dog just to counteract his offenses to it. Interesting, huh? Here's a great Vaishnava, Shivananda Sena, and he's offering his obeisance to a dog. But what is that dog? Who is that? Who is that dog? Aradina ke hatara dekana paila, Shidhab deha paya, kukur baikonte tegela. The next day no one saw that dog, for it had obtained its spiritual body and departed for Vaikuntha, the spiritual kingdom. Haribo, Haribo. Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ki jai. Shivananda Sena's dog ki jai. I should say Shivananda Sener kukur ki. And Krishnadas Kaviraj concludes this little episode, Aiche Dibyalila Kore Shachir Nandan Kukurake Krishna Kahaya Korila Mochan. Such are the transcendental pastimes of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the son of Mother Sachi. He even delivered a dog simply by inducing it to chant the Maha Mantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Gaur Premanande. I think we have 1 or 2 or 3 minutes if there's a question or a comment. I don't know if we have another microphone, though. Do we? Or if you can speak very loudly. Yes, Mataji.
Thank you for a very nice lecture. Very interesting topic. And I have 2 questions. One question is about when you mentioned Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in Rath Yatra. And he showed his ecstasy to the people.
Hello.
And he showed his ecstasy to the people. So, because he take the darshan of Lord Jagannath through the Rath Yatra. So my first question is that, as at that time, as we know that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is Krishna himself, but the mood of Radharani. My question is that in Rath Yatra, Chaitanya attend this Rath Yatra. I mean, so is it at that time Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mood is Radharani or his Krishna's mood? This is my first question. And second question is
Two in one.
Sorry. And you mentioned there is Varaha. Varaha is a white pig. And as we know that the Lord is the Adi Purusha. And before Lord Naraha appearance, is there a white pig? Or after that we have the white pig in this material world? This is my second question. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much.
Hare Krishna. To the first question, that's pretty straightforward, yes. Certainly we understand Lord Chaitanya is in the Rath Yatra. That's kind of the whole point of that pastime. Lord Chaitanya is in the mood of Radha, who is drawing Krishna back to Vrindavan. Because she is seeing him in Kurukshetra and feeling very, very awkward, feeling very out of place there. The residents of Vrindavan in general, the gopis and Radha in particular, they're feeling so out of place. They're seeing Krishna. Krishna is there, but in what sort of mood? He's in this, he's all dressed up, it's all, princely opulence. It's everything but the sweet intimacy of Vrindavan, and yet it's Krishna. And so in that mood, she is, and the devotees, they are pulling Krishna, they're drawing Krishna. Krishna, Krish, Karshana, means to draw. So they are drawing he who draws, he who attracts. The Supreme Lord attracts all living entities, and he is attracted by the devotion of his devotees. And these devotees, his best, his most exalted devotees, the Vrindavan Vasis, are now drawing him to Vrindavan. That is being reenacted, so to say, in Puri with the Ratha Yatra festival. As for pigs, white pigs or black pigs, colors, which comes first? Well, Krishna is, yes, as you said, Adi Purusha, and so he is the primordial source of all forms. So we can say like that whatever form of any animal that we see in the world, the original form of that is the Lord. And that becomes an impetus then for remembering the Lord, and also for respecting and valuing and caring for the animals and being connected with them. I mean, this is a big subject which I can only touch on. Yeah, I think our time is up now. Where is our organizer? Is our next speaker here? Who is our next speaker? Anyway, go ahead.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Thank you very much Maharaj for the wonderful lecture you gave.
Hare Krishna.
Maharaj, my question is that in the pastime of Shivanand's dog's liberation, what teachings we can draw? Are we lower than the dog? Because there is no difference between Lord and Lord's name. So the devotees are chanting and we are chanting Lord's name, but we don't feel that ecstasy, and which the dog actually once chanting Hare Krishna and got liberation. So what can we?
Yeah, this
what
is
can teach from this.
This was a similar situation is described in the Sri Vaishnava tradition related to Ramanujacharya, that he was sitting by the bank of this one pukur, which is within the compound of the Srirangam temple, and he was throwing bits of prasad into the pukur, and fish were coming up and jumping out of the water, catching that prasadam, and immediately, we are told, manifesting four-armed form and going up, back home, back to Godhead, Vaikunta. And Ramanujacharya's associates, his followers, his disciples were with him, and they were observing all of this, watching. And they were astonished. And one of them asked, after seeing a few fish flying up, they said, Guru Maharaj, why is it we have taken so much prasad, so much of your prasad, and we're still here? There's only 2 arms, there's no 4 arms. So what's with, they're just fish, what is this? And Ramanujacharya said, that is because of aparad, because we commit aparad, offense. Therefore we're still here. Hare Krishna. So yes, therefore, Lord Chaitanya's instruction, Trinadapi sunichena. Nicha means low, sunicha means very low, more low, completely low. So that we want to cultivate that sense. And what helps to do this is to remember our size. What is our size? How big are we?
1 by 10,000.
Take one tip of your hair, divide it
10,000 parts.
into, well, first start by dividing it into 100 parts. Let's see if you can manage that. And if you can manage that, you're doing quite well. Take one of those 100 parts, divide that into 100 parts. Ding, that's who we are. I'm here. Where are you? 1/10,000th the type of a hair. I'm here somewhere. Yeah, so we're very small. But that smallness is also our joy. It's the source of our joy. We don't have to compete with all of those who are, struggling to make a place in the world, because there's no need. And in this sense of our smallness, we can naturally be humble. When we are humble, then we can avoid offense. Yeah. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Maharaj, I heard that Guru means he has the authority to slap or chastise also. So, and Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he used to, I hear that he's as soft as a rose and also as strong as a thunderbolt. And that is why devotees get delivered under his authority. And it's a good example. I was thinking, I learned that I also was told that parents and elders have the right to chastise or slap, or so for our advancement. And then the aparadhas stop, and then we quickly advance.
Yeah, sometimes the Guru is, as one of the Guru's duties to help us in our progress of spiritual life, may have to speak sharply. It's sometimes mentioned, there may even be a physical slap, but that will be also a loving slap. And this was what Shivananda Sena understood when Nityananda Prabhu kicked him, right? Nityananda, you know this pastime. Shivananda was, because he was so busy trying to organize, he forgot, or he seemed to forget, to neglect taking care for Nityananda Prabhu's accommodation. And Nityananda Prabhu is famous for his intense emotions, and he expressed himself without any restraint when he kicked Shivananda Sena on the chest. Shivananda Sena took that as a blessing. Shivananda Sena's wife was very upset. But Shivananda understood, I am getting the blessing. Tell me, if you were kicked on the chest by Nityananda Prabhu, how would you feel? Is that all? You just say, Haribol Prabhu. Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ki, Shri Nityananda Prabhu ki, Shri Mayapur Dham ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Ananta Goti Vaishnava Vrinda ki, Nitai Gaura Premanande. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much.